Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Wondery.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quests to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
I did it on my own in the beginning, and that just did not work because I knew it wouldn't work. I didn't have anybody to hold me accountable. I didn't hold myself accountable. I still lied. I still cheated. I still, did all the negative things. I never fixed myself. I never did any of that. So when I decided to get sober this time, I said, clearly my way did not work last time. I'm going in the complete opposite direction. I am going to recover out loud for those struggling in silence. I am going to tell my story in hopes that it's going to save somebody else, in hopes that it's going to inspire somebody else. Because like I was saying before, how addiction just turns you into this other person. I know there are others out there that think there's no way out of addiction except taking your own life to get yourself out of this place. And I don't want somebody to have to feel that way like I did.
That's Damian Bloss, who spent 20 years in active addiction. This is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I'm Jason Blair. Damian Bloss spent 20 years in active addiction before becoming sober. Damien says his addiction began, as it does for so many people, with loss. In his case, the loss of a close family member who he knew was depressed and suicidal and who died by his own hand. Addiction is complex, and the reasons people become addicts is often multifaceted. But Damien points out that he carried the guilt for 2 decades, suppressing it, he says, with alcohol. As so many addicts do, Damien said he was trying to lose his pain and he lost himself. Damien entered treatment for his addiction, and in March of 2020, just as the COVID-19 pandemic was hitting, he walked off the grounds of Ashley Addiction Treatment, a treatment center on a 146-acre campus on the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland, and into a world that seemed to be falling apart. Ashley was founded in 1964 by Father Joseph Martin and May Ashley Abram, who met at a talk at Johns Hopkins University. May, who was struggling with addiction, had come to hear Iowa Senator Harold Hughes, and at the last minute, much to May's dismay, the Catholic priest came in his place. In the talk, Father Martin talked about addiction as a disease, not a moral failing, and that struck a chord with May. like so many things that led people into addiction and also into recovery, the treatment center came about by accident. For Damien, an accidental phone call is what changed everything. Damien has written a book, co-founded a support group dedicated to helping people struggling with comorbid mental health and addiction challenges, and is hoping that his story can provide addicts and anyone suffering hope for a fresh start. Today, we're going to discuss substance abuse and recovery, how you know you have a problem, how to live a life where you're always one step away from another drink or another hit, and how recovery goes so far beyond simply stopping. So, Damien, I just wanted to thank you for joining me. I have for a long time wanted to do an episode where we explored addiction and some of the related issues to it and recovery as well. I feel like it's such an important topic for people. And as I'm sure we'll get into today is, while there's stereotypes about it, it touches everyone, touches every family. Like you can't throw a rock too far from yourself without addiction or recovery affecting you. And I'm a big believer, as I think you are, but tell me if I'm wrong, that one of the real challenges with addiction is we don't talk about it enough.
Absolutely.
So I just appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable and come on and talk about it with me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on your show as well. And, thank you for allowing me to have this, show to be able to express this, because you're right. It's not talked about enough. There's such a stigma. We always feel like we're being judged or looked down upon. And that's not the case at all. None of us want to be addicts, none of us, we don't want that. It just so happens that we are. And that's not who or what defines us. So I totally appreciate you letting me come on here.
I was just talking to a friend who, has never dealt with addiction themselves. And they were asking me questions about it. And I was telling them, like, look, if you meet anybody who's been like an addict for 2 months, nobody's happy about being an addict. Like, I have yet to run and find the person who, after like 2 months of addiction, is like, woohoo, thank God I'm an addict. So
Yep.
I think being able to at least bring the conversation out, and as somebody who's in recovery myself, I think that it's a relevant, an important thing. It's a great reminder. It's great to have conversations. The same reason I go to meetings or I have, personal conversations with people about it. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you about that I was just sort of thinking about, maybe a good way to kick it off is, as somebody who's in recovery, one of the hardest things for me has been not hard. I don't want to say this is a hard thing, but one of the more curious things for me has been sort of like searching for answers about why I became an addict and let's say my brother didn't, and how I became an addict and how other people don't. And I have that same challenge when I think about my recovery, because I can describe to people clearly what my rock bottom was. There was this moment where, I had this meeting set up with my boss, and I think I had originally set up the meeting because I was thinking, like, I want to tell her what job I want to have next. I want to be an international correspondent. I want to go to Africa, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. And I ended up like that night saying to myself, like, oh, I need to get some rest tonight, get some sleep. And then I woke up at like 11 o'clock or whatever time it was. And I was like, I need some crack. And I found myself on the streets of Bed-Stuy in the middle of the night before this breakfast meeting with my boss across town, like searching for crack on the streets. And I came back and I remember, and I did find it. I wasn't looking for crack. Let me correct that. I was looking for cocaine. I found crack. And I like did it. And then I remember looking in the mirror in the bathroom with like only a couple hours to go to this meeting and just being like, holy cow, who is that person in the mirror? That's not the pretty little boy your mom raised. And I can tell you that was a rock bottom moment, but I don't even understand how I really or why I got into recovery. So one of the things that I'm curious about, this is a long-winded way of saying, one of the things that I'm curious about from your perspective, what was life growing up for you like? What, what led you in your mind toward your addiction and your sobriety? And, you know, because, yeah, what was your life journey like?
Yeah, not a problem. So my journey, growing up, I was in a loving household. My parents, they weren't alcoholics. Nothing that I had would make what society would deem that guy's going to be an alcoholic or an addict. Nothing in my life through my childhood never showed that. And that was that's the whole thing about addiction too, is the stereotypes that like society will put on addicts and us in recovery as well. But yeah, so growing up, n- fairly normal childhood. My parents did divorce when I was 8 years old. So I went to live full time with my mom, but I saw my dad court ordered every weekend, but he was also my baseball coach. So I saw him every day of the week. So I still had my parents in my life. Baseball was my life. I lived and died for baseball. I
Mm.
wanted to be, a part of the Baltimore Orioles when I grew up, and that was my lifelong dream. And you know, I started to self-destruct when I was about 18, going on 19. So, in society's eyes, I was a late bloomer, um, and so the way that happened is a very close family member of mine. Kind of, he was like my fun uncle, um, and he had passed away. He died by suicide, um,
Mm.
and I didn't know how to wrap my head around that. Like,
How old are you?
I was about 18 going on 19.
Okay.
Um,
So not much experience, probably, I'm guessing, with death in general, and definitely not somebody who's
no.
younger. Yeah.
Yeah, not at all. Like my grandparents had passed away, but natural causes and things like that. So, um, it wasn't anything like this. And the I don't think it was just that he committed suicide. I think what it was is that I'm the only one that knew about this. I'm the only one that ever knew that he had these thoughts. I don't know why he confided in me with this. And it's
He
I don't
he
blame
confided
him.
in you about, like, his depression or
Yeah,
suicidal thoughts? Interesting.
yeah, exactly, and nobody else in the family knew about this, and, when he had done it, the family, they were pointing fingers at each other like, "It was your fault," or, "It was his fault or her fault because you didn't come around," and blah, 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 and I'm like, "There is no way that I am going to tell any of them that I knew about this the whole time." So
Oh, so there was a blame game going
yeah.
on among everyone, and I imagine, like, they're all upset. I think of
Oh,
this, like,
yeah.
when grandparents die or older people die, everybody starts pointing fingers at each other about things, in part because it's really just the way that they're processing and managing their grief. But I'm just trying to imagine, like, as an 18-year-old listening to these people all point their fingers at each other and knowing that, like, you knew,
Mhm.
and you're like, so that sort of like silences you. But did you feel like you were taking on like a tremendous amount of guilt, sort of like, I knew?
Oh,
And yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I took on that guilt, um, and it became this huge problem of mine, and I didn't know, like, I went through depression and, I'm having nightmares every night and, I can't sleep and hardly eat, and I had turned to alcohol, and what it did was I would drink until it suppressed all those emotions, all that guilt, everything that I felt. It compacted it down so deep till it was nearly gone. And now I'm this totally different person. I am I actually loved myself. I loved myself before, but I liked who I started to become. I started to become this person who was now able to be outgoing, and I was able to be
Mm.
goofy, and I was totally different than I was, a year before or 2 years before. I'm like, I kind of like this person, and it seems that everybody else does too. Friends and associates and things like that. I'm like, all right, I can deal with this. I'm not an introvert anymore. Um, I can be lively, and free.
Free. Yeah, because like what you're describing, like when I hear you talking about that, like part of what I'm hearing is it's like you all of a sudden felt relaxed. And it reminds
Mhm.
me of like I have this friend who jokes she has a lot of anxiety and has never taken any anxiety meds. And she's like, I'm never going to take a heavy duty anxiety med because I'm afraid if I ever take it and I learn what the rest of you all live like, I'm never going to want to go back. Like,
Right.
but one of the things in listening to what you were saying, I was thinking, well, one, you have good taste. You're an Orioles fan. And two, as a fellow Marylander and Orioles fan, and
Awesome.
it sounds like for you, like all of a sudden that guilt as in there is a problem turned into shame. I am the problem. And that shame became something that you couldn't solve with like a conversation or processing it because it was bigger than a problem. It became you were the problem. And so you medicated the problem. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's totally fair. And I was more than likely going to be an alcoholic at some point anyway. Um, just the way the things were going, the way my brain was, it had already been developing, and I think it was going to happen anyway. It just so happened that it happened earlier in my life. When that traumatic event happened.
Yeah. So did you, during that period, did you ever tell anyone what you knew?
I didn't tell anyone until I wrote my book. So 20 years later, nobody in my family knew about it. My wife had only known about it about 10 years ago. I was never talking about it. I had never told anybody about it. Like I said, my family didn't know until my book came out. So that was a surprise to them. My wife only knew about it because, you know, in my heaviest drinking times, um, that is all I would talk about. I would get completely obliterated, and get into my emotional phase of that drinking time
Hmm.
where all these emotions are coming out and she's the one I'm leaning on. And it just so happened that every single time I started to drink, those same emotions came out to where it was like, you got to talk to somebody. I'm like, no, I'm talking to you. You know what I mean? And
It
it's,
just,
um,
yeah, it just kept on coming back to that, it sounds like.
yeah, exactly. And, I didn't want to go see a therapist. I didn't want to do anything. I thought what I was doing was the right thing to do.
This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy, comfy. I'm cozy, cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes, blisters. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and t-shirts that give back. One purchased equals one donated. Now go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code Wondery for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code Wondery at checkout.
Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's joinmochi.com with promo code AUDIO40.
Culture evolves at the speed of light, just like your financial needs. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you in the know and ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve. We'll help you monitor your progress and give personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals and find your way to money. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on.
Rakuten is the smartest way to save money when you shop because you earn cash back at over 3,500 stores. Fashion, beauty, electronics, home essentials, travel, dining, concert tickets, and more. Your favorite stores like Lowe's, Levi's, and Nike pay Rakuten to send them shoppers. And Rakuten then passes on a part of that payment to its members as cash back. You're already shopping at your favorite stores. Why not save while you're doing it? It's a no-brainer. Membership is free and easy to sign up. Get the Rakuten app now and join the 17 million members who are already saving. Cashback rates change daily. See Rakuten.com for details. That's Rakuten. Your cash back really adds up.
Hyundai knows the road can feel like it's out to get you sometimes. Potholes lurking around corners, distracted pedestrians stepping out of nowhere, and those nerve-wracking blind spot moments we all dread. That's why they've been revolutionizing safety for nearly 2 decades. With over 130 IIHS Top Safety Awards since 2006, they're not just talking about safety, they're defining it. Their available class-exclusive features include the available blind spot view monitor that shows you a live video feed of your blind spots, the standard forward collision avoidance assist that can automatically brake in emergencies, and a standard driver attention warning system that helps keep you focused on the road. Because at Hyundai, they put your safety first and everything else second. Learn more about Hyundai at HyundaiUSA.com. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details. IIHS Top Safety Awards include Top Safety Pick and Top Safety Pick Plus awards to Hyundai vehicles from 2006 to 2025.
How did your family react when they found out? Was
Surprised.
it what you expected? Okay.
Yeah, no, they were surprised. My mom actually broke down and she was like, I really wish you would have told me, and, all those things. And like, I really, now knowing, and she was genuine about it. Like, you should have told me. But, back in that time, there's no way that I could come out with that and then be able to look at you in the face, and think everything is okay. There was no way that I could have gotten around that. So,
and so in a weird way, you were trying to avoid blame, right?
Oh yeah.
Avoid everybody in the room thinking this is my fault because I knew. And what actually happened was you probably ended up, and there was no way for you to know this, you probably ended up cutting yourself off from support and causing you to blame yourself. So it was blame, just blame self-imposed.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I took that on and just ran with it. That way, I'm not hurting anybody else. I'm only hurting myself. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's like, and that's the worst thing but that's what us addicts do. And that's, we don't look at it as like, this is going to hurt anybody else. I'm doing this to myself, not you. So don't worry about me, kind of thing.
And that's one of those like universal things about addiction. Like, it involves isolation, I feel. And it's like we isolate ourselves, then the addiction itself isolates us. And then that isolation makes it harder to get help or to connect with people. And it just sort of like boomerangs around and becomes this ridiculous cycle of carrying, even though you're initially trying to numb the pain, it actually starts to cause the pain to get worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine carrying it that long. It must have been interesting for you. Did you feel freed a little bit once you told them? I mean, even I know you were several years into recovery before you wrote the book, but I imagine there must have been something freeing in seeing the reaction.
It was, and the showing that they actually did care, especially my mom, because she was the closest one to, the situation at that time, with
It
me
was
and the
her
dog,
brother.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so, like, it was for her to be like, to see her reaction, her crying, and it was like, "You get it now." I wish I would have been able to tell you back then, and, it was a very somber moment, and her and I, we cried together, talked about it,
Mm.
and, we're everything is good now, but, yeah, it was a relief. I can say that when I was able to talk about it, um, I had done the therapy, so my therapist did know about it before my family did and before I wrote the book and things like that. It wasn't as freeing. It was freeing, but it wasn't as freeing than be able to tell the source, you know?
Yeah, right, right. Because I imagine, like, there's nothing quite like the bond between siblings. And for her to lose her brother, that is so big. And you have to know how big that is for you. But the other thing in that story is he shared with you and no one else. So he must have
Mhm.
felt a special connection to you. And, it's just, it all feels like very, very heavy. And, you had mentioned before that, like, one of the things that you had said before was that you didn't have a family of alcoholics or addicts. And, it sounds like, did you grow up sort of like suburban middle class or, you know,
Well, not really.
okay.
My parents were working parents. In fact, what's funny about it is that I grew up in a trailer park.
Hmm.
Not like 8 Mile trailer park, but it was a trailer park nonetheless. And but yeah, I wouldn't say that
Where did you
middle
grow up?
class.
Where was it?
It actually it was in Harford County, Maryland, a little
Oh,
town
yeah.
called Edgewood.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So rural area at the time, probably when you were growing up, or more rural with pockets of little urbanism, as I call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you grew up there. You guys, was your family like tight knit and in the area, or?
Yeah, yeah. My grandparents lived about 2 minutes down the road in the same trailer park. My
Oh, neat.
cousins lived in the same trailer park, so it was kinda like a family thing, and, so yeah, it was really cool.
So you guys were close. That's kind of cool. It's always nice.
Yeah.
I find I have a little bit of jealousy because my parents they both moved from where they were to go to college, and they were the first in both of their families to go to college. But it's always meant we've been a little further away from families. So you had like support around you. It sounds like you had like
Mhm.
those important qualities like love and obviously a bunch of people who it sounds like cared about each other. And it just makes me think like, you didn't have addiction in your family. You've got this family support around, like if we turn on the TV or look at a movie, there's a certain sort of like profile of an addict. And, I, I always think of this like in the different meetings, whether I was in New York or whether I was in the DC area or wherever I've gone. Like one thing that will knock away all of your misconceptions about who becomes an addict is to walk into a meeting and run into the teacher, the priest, the business executive, the person who's barely living on the streets. Like addiction knows no bounds. It doesn't care whether you grew up in a trailer park or whether you grew up in a mansion or whether as long as there's access to addictive uh, things. I think the big difference that I've found is like the consequences might vary based on your background. Like maybe money can protect you for a little while from the consequences, but sometimes that can even lead to a worse outcome. But I'm just wondering and thinking about your background, was it hard for you to identify that you were an addict? And could some of that have been you just didn't see yourself as somebody who could be an addict?
Oh yeah, definitely. When I would look at addiction or someone in active addiction, um, my the way I perceived them to be is that you lost your job, you lost your car, you lost your house, you just look disheveled. All the typical stereotypes that us addicts get. I didn't have any of that. I still had my job and I still had a car. I still had a roof over my head, whether it was mine or somebody else's. I still had one over my head. And so I didn't lose anything until that time until I did lose myself, which is the worst thing that you can lose. Everything else can be replaced, all the materialistic things. But when you lose yourself, that is when you have hit rock bottom. Um, and so I never looked at myself as an addict. I never looked at myself as an alcoholic. Um, it was a normal thing for me. So yeah, it was very hard to admit out loud that I had a problem.
What did you mean when you said the hardest thing is to lose yourself?
Yeah, when you have become kind of like what you were saying earlier about when you look in the mirror and you didn't recognize who you were, um, that's exactly losing yourself when you become this person that is unknown to you because we still remember who we used to be prior to addiction. And at least and I did. I remembered I loved myself. And when I looked in the mirror and I saw this person that I no longer was and I no longer knew, I absolutely hated me. I hated myself and I turned into something that I never thought I would. You know, I don't know what I was capable of doing. Um, I was never abusive. I was never the abusive drunk or things like that. But I don't know if I could have been capable of that. I never thought about, wanting to take my own life, but I had thought about it and I came very, very close to doing it. I was on the cusp of doing it. So that is what I mean when I say losing yourself. You become somebody that you no longer know.
Yeah, like you can see an image of yourself, but you don't recognize it in you. Like that moment, like where I was looking in the mirror and describing that to you, I like I can't say that's the only moment, but I felt like there were flashes of moments where I was like, that was a very different guy. Or flashes of moments where I get exactly what you're saying, where like I remembered the old me. And I for a while I looked at it as a curiosity. Oh, look how much I've changed. But then I began to look at it like, you know, you don't have the same values. You don't have the same behaviors that you used to have. All these things that people used to say that they liked about me or that I liked about myself became more distant and faded. And all you know how you describe that moment where like, oh, this is fun. I'm funnier and more outgoing than I was before. And it starts to like, it may start off like that, but all of all of the upside for me in my experience, and I'm curious if it was like this for you, starts to fade, and the only thing that is remaining is how do I get to the next drink? How do I get to the next hit? And my life just became consumed by like, if somebody wanted to go to a play, like what I was thinking about was not the play, but like, can I drink at the play? Can we go to the bar afterwards? Am I just going to go to the bar anyway and not go to the play? You know what I mean? Like everything began to revolve around the addiction. And it sounds crazy, but I think part of it is very insidious, right? Like it's not that you initially start thinking like my life is going to revolve around my addiction, but it slowly becomes about that. Like I got 2 places to go, and one place is with some of my best friends, and the other place is with, less good friends, but they're going to get high and they're going to go drinking. And all of a sudden your life is just revolving around that. But in my head in that moment, I'm just thinking, oh, they're going to have more fun. And I think that's part of how I got to the point where I was like, who the heck am I? But yeah, I was just curious. Did you experience any of that sense of like it's taken over my life?
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. Because when I always used to say I'm never going to be that person that sits outside the liquor store before they open, or I'm never going to steal money to get it, and things like that. And I became that. It consumed my life so much that when the time between me not having a drink and when I would have my next one, before I would go through the withdrawal, got shorter and shorter. So I had to have a drink in my hand at all times. I was outside the liquor store, waiting for it to open. 8:00 in the morning, it doesn't open till 9. I'm sitting out there, sweating, and it's the middle of January, and I'm sweating and shaking. I can't even hold anything in my hand because I can't stop shaking, and I can't speak, and I'm getting sick, and it's just not happening fast enough for me. And it started getting to that point, and I just, when I would wake up, I needed a drink. And I remember this one time, it happened a couple of times, but this one specific time, I would always have a cup, and I would leave it in the kitchen full with my liquor, and I'm thinking that I'm masking it, because what I would do is I would get like raspberry iced tea, and then I'd get raspberry vodka and pour it in it, thinking that's masking the alcohol smell. And I would leave it in the kitchen so that when I wake up in the morning, I have that to alleviate the withdrawal. Well, my wife dumped it out. And so I woke up the next morning and I had nothing. And I didn't want to tell her that, she screwed up big time, because I needed that. And
it'll bring attention to the fact that there was a problem.
Exactly. I didn't want her to know that anything was going on. And I know she's not stupid, but so she knew. But the thing is that I thought that I was keeping this secret. And
and also there's this difference between like, I know that you know that I know you know, and we're not going to actually talk about it, and then events that actually force you to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, and so I would have to have it 24/7.
You know what makes every outfit look better? The right bra from Third Love. Their bras make it easy to ultimate cleavage, a smooth look, or even stop your shirt buttons from pulling. They make over 60 sizes, including half cups you won't find anywhere else, so you'll find your perfect fit. Third Love solves bra problems, or what they call broblems. Real women test every style they make. Comfort and support are guaranteed. So stop settling for bad bras. You deserve better. Get your problem solved today. Save $15 on your first order with code podcast15 at thirdlove.com.
Calling all dog owners. Your furry friend deserves top-notch nourishment, and Ollie delivers the clean, fresh nutrition your dog needs in 5 flavors they'll absolutely flip over. Ollie is made in U.S. kitchens with ingredients carefully sourced from trusted growers and producers around the world, with absolutely no harmful fillers or preservatives. With protein-first recipes like fresh beef with sweet potatoes, fresh turkey with blueberries, or fresh lamb with cranberries, you might start thinking, dang, my dog eats better than I do. And that's probably true when it comes to Ollie. Give your pup a fresh start this new year by letting them taste test a personalized meal plan with Ollie. Head to ollie.com/Wondery. Tell them all about your dog and use code WONDERY to get 60% off your first box of meals when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a clean bowl guarantee on the first box. So if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. That's OLLIE.com/Wondery and enter code WONDERY to get 60% off your first box. Start your dog's new year off right with Ollie. Start your dog's new year off right with Ollie.
The withdrawal would wake me up at night, and I'd have to, go down and take a few drinks just to come back down to normal. Drinking was no longer fun. It was survival at this point. So I just had to have it at all times. And I would, to go back on your point about, it taking over my life, I would have to buy enough that would make up for tomorrow, because I know when I wake up tomorrow, and if I don't have any, I'm going to continuously have to go through this again. So I would buy so much in advance. And before I knew it, I was buying, weeks in advance, but I was drinking it the same week. So that week in advance didn't last. And, that's when I could realize, like, man, what am I doing? I can't live like this anymore. How do I get out of this?
So I was going to ask you about something too, because it was interesting listening to you talk about that, because that's one of the things I was wondering about, sort of like the depths of dependency, because, like in the public conversation, that kind of dependency that like you and I know exists for alcoholics tends to be like relegated in people's minds to drug addicts. Like that idea of like waiting outside the store, they think that's like a drug addict kind of thing. And I remember when I was in New York and I was getting sober, there used to be these like old school meetings. So I loved AA meetings because I felt like there was often a more robust conversation in some of the AA meetings as opposed to the Narcotics Anonymous meetings. So I always gravitated toward the AA meetings, but there are these AA meetings in the Bronx, and these people are like totally old school, absolutely old school, hilarious, very wise, but completely old school. And they would be like, you can't talk about any other drug here other than alcohol. And I was like, guys, it's the same thing, right? Like for me, it was the same thing. But I've always wondered for people who their primary drug was alcohol, or they only used alcohol, whether it's a little easier, and you tell me what you think, a little easier to delude yourself into you don't have a problem because it's, quote, just alcohol.
I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because I 100% agree that it seems like, alcohol, because it is just alcohol and it's so socially acceptable, that you don't think that it would be that bad because it's everywhere. I mean, drugs and things like that are everywhere. Heroin, crack, cocaine, and all that, that's everywhere as well. It's just not broadcasted. So when an alcoholic, there a lot of me, I can speak from my experience. I didn't say that I was an alcoholic because why? Everybody does it. It's all over the TV, the news, the commercials and things like that. And it's associated with sports and, just how is alcohol considered so bad? And that's how I used to think. Like, it can't be that bad if they're, exploiting it all over the place.
Mm-hmm. And where we hear about it in a negative connotation is like driving. But like, I don't think we talk a lot about the relationships that fall apart, or the domestic violence, or just being miserable, right? Like straight up, the whole point of this little endeavor we're on is to have a higher quality of life. And being miserable is not. Like I just feel like we don't talk about that piece of it. We just sort of like want to turn away sometimes. Another thing you said that like caught me, you were talking about the mug on the counter and your wife and like not telling her. And, I was thinking to myself as you were saying that about addicts, like, if you were to ask me, like, do addicts keep secrets? I would say all addicts keep secrets. And like if we're a bunch of addicts hanging out together, like if we were all hanging out together and we were drinking alcohol or we were doing cocaine, someone would be like hiding the last gram of cocaine or somebody would be hiding a liquor bottle. We're just totally secrets people. And just like isolation, I think it's all about the secrets. And I'm sure you relate to that. I'm sure there's been a hidden bottle every now and
Oh, 100%. Yes.
right. So, one of the things, so like I love the perception that people have, or not love, that addicts can't be trusted. I think that's a general rule. Like I've never lied, stolen, cheated as much as I have during my active addiction, but I've always felt like I can really trust someone in recovery. And I was thinking about like, why do I trust people in recovery? Well, like if they're really in recovery and they're doing well, they're like being honest with themselves. They're trying to make amends where it'll do no harm. Like all of those things, they're doing all of those things. But there's this line I love that I heard in an AA meeting, sort of like in my first year of sobriety, which is, you are only as sick as your secrets. And so like a healthy person in recovery, I really believe, is not keeping secrets. Doesn't mean I'm telling everybody everything, but I'm being like straight up and honest about what I'm feeling, my shitty thinking sometimes, like what my motives are. And, when you were talking about that, it just reminded me because I was thinking to myself, like maybe this is the one addict I've run into who doesn't keep secrets, but I guess not. So, but one of the things like I was sort of thinking about was just this idea that like for me personally, a red flag for me is like if I get into a conversation with somebody, like especially one of my friends, and they like ask me something straight up, like, what do you think about X? Or how are you feeling about Y? Or why did you do this? And I like shade the truth. Like even just like leaving out, like even if it's a question where like they're asking a question, technically they asked it this way, but I don't really tell them what I'm feeling or thinking. So I dodge through the hole between the actual question and what their real intent is. The moment I do that, I know I'm in trouble because I know I'm moving into like hiding mode and probably isolation mode. And that it's a sign for me that I need to like go to a meeting, go be honest with some people or open with some people, go to therapy, do whatever it is that I need to do. And I was wondering for you in recovery, in early recovery, in the last few years of recovery, what has it felt like? Because I feel, and I was talking to a friend of mine in December about this, like just that notion that while I'm not constantly thinking about drugs and alcohol, I know like I am like one small decision away. Like I still know that in my heart. And I still and there are tools out for me. But I'm curious about what that process of staying sober has been like for you.
Yeah. So, I can't say that I never think about it. And, there are times that still sounds good to me that I could have one, like on a nice sunny day, in the early spring, you're sitting out on your deck and I'm like, this would go really good right now. I know I'm not that type of drinker. I know I'm not, but people can do it. So I think I could do it. When I start having those thoughts,
Mm.
I know that something bad could potentially happen, and I open up about it right away. Either go to a meeting or at this stage, if I really need to, I can talk to somebody. I have so many resources now that it doesn't last very long. So if I just need to talk, I know who I can call or who I can talk to in person and things like that. But yeah, there are a number of times where I'm like, I could do it, and that's that sick, stinking thinking, that they talk about. Like, that is still that disease telling us, hey, remember, I'm still here, but I'm not. You could do it
Right.
once,
Yeah, come hang out alone with me. Because, like,
Exactly.
one of the things I think you're, like, nailing, I love to see what your thought on this is. Like, I used to think in my head that addiction, the opposite of addiction is sobriety. But I've come to the conclusion that the opposite of addiction is connection. Because everything about addiction isolates you. The disease itself tries to isolate you. Like, I really sometimes feel like it's a person. And I remember actually, having images like that. But that notion that really the opposite of addiction, or more precisely, the solution to addiction, is connection. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think you hit it right on the head. Because you're absolutely right. That sobriety and addiction, you would think that's the common conception, that is the opposite. But I totally agree with connection, because you're doing completely opposite from what you were doing in active addiction. Like you said, isolating is the number one thing in active addiction. So to do the complete opposite of that is being around others and really communicating and holding yourselves accountable and things like that, doing the complete opposite of what you used to do, the lying, not lying, you know, eh, everything that we would do to, whether it was, how about, damaging relationships? How about on the opposite side, creating and, you know, transforming relationships and, maybe rebuilding old relationships that you thought that you ruined in active addiction, things like that. Um, so yeah, I 100% agree with you on that.
Heck, it's helped me, like, fix relationships that I've ruined since active addiction. Because, like, like, I always think about this. Like, I was baffled when I went into AA about the 12 steps. I was like, well, okay. I mean, I was humbled to the point you could have told me, like, stand upside down and clank a submarine. I mean, submarine, not a submarine. Clank a symbol against the wall, and that's the way you're not going to be sober, or that you will be sober. So I was like, all right, I'll take the 12 steps, whatever.
Mm.
But I was always baffled in the beginning about, like, why the 12th one was about service. And it dawned on me, it's about keeping that connection and keeping that reminder. And one of the things in, like, AA and NA is this notion of anonymity, that we, like, don't share about our addiction. I didn't have a choice because mine was on the front page of the New York Times and other places like that. So we don't necessarily share about our addiction, in part because we want to protect our own anonymity, in part we don't want to out other people who we know. And also, we don't want to, like, when you're a public figure, in my place, you don't want to have, like, some kind of tragic relapse that changes the way people view addiction. Now, I think all of those things about anonymity are good things. But I think part of the challenge is, and this is sort of like a challenge I have with that idea, is that in that 12th step where we're doing service, should that service really just be limited to the people who are in our meetings or our closest family? Because how do we stop the misconceptions or the stigma, or reach out to that person who doesn't have a sober person in their orbit, or a person who can help in their orbit, if we aren't more open about it? Now, I respect anyone's decision to go in any direction on this, because you can find 1,000 ways to be of service. But I'm curious why you decided to, as somebody who, from my chair, didn't have a choice about telling his story. I'm curious why you decided, because you could have, like, never said anything to anyone outside of the people closest to you. Why did you decide to come out and start talking about it?
Yeah, definitely. So I used to do it my way. My way was when I would try to get sober in the past, it was, let me do this on the down low. Not going to tell anybody. That way, when I screw up, because I know I'm going to, because once I say if I screw up, that means I've already planned on relapsing or I've already planned on just not stopping at all.
Or trying to get
That way,
sober alone through your willpower. Willpower.
yeah, exactly. I can do this on my own. You don't
Right.
need anybody. So yeah, I did it on my own in the beginning, and that just did not work because I knew it wouldn't work. I didn't have anybody to hold me accountable. I didn't hold myself accountable. I still lied. I still cheated. I still, did all the negative things. I never fixed myself. I never um did any of that. So when I decided to get sober this time, I said, clearly my way did not work last time. I'm going in the complete opposite direction. I am going to recover out loud for those struggling in silence. I am going to tell my story in hopes that it's going to save somebody else, in hopes that it's going to inspire somebody else. Because like I was saying before, how addiction just turns you into this other person. I know there are others out there that think there's no way out of addiction except taking your own life to get yourself out of this place. And I don't want somebody to have to feel that way like I did.
So that they have hope.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
that-
They're exactly sharing it anywhere, everywhere that I can. That's the only way that I can see that the stigma is going to be broken. I know that there's still judgments out there, people judging and looking down upon people, but I look past that now because
Judge me.
I
all you
know
want.
exactly because it does not define me. I am going to beat this right now. I know that in the end, I'm not going to beat this completely. I know that for a fact, and I've accepted that, but I'm going to beat it right now in the minutes, the days, the hours, anything that comes after. I'll deal with that when it gets there. Right now, I'm sober. I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to tell everyone that you do not have to hold this stuff in and hold yourself accountable. This way, when with me speaking out about it, that's me holding myself accountable. I'm not naive enough to know that I'm not going to relapse. I know that I can relapse, but I'm still going to talk about it as much as I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of your healing, part of your service. Something interesting. So when you were talking about that part of you that wanted to go it alone, which I think is a very relatable thing, because before most of us, not everyone, but most of us get sober, we try on our own. And then we realize this whole willpower thing ain't going to work. So how are we going to get help? But something dawned on me as you were talking, and I was thinking about the 12 steps. And the first person who introduced me to the 12 steps was the employee assistance counselor at the New York Times. Already had disclosed I had a drug addiction problem. And she said, she was soft pedaling it. She was like, I don't know if you're an addict or not. And I'm sure she's thinking in her head, you were bloody an addict. But the 12 steps are really good for anyone. In retrospect, I'm like, nice move. But it kind of connected with, in my scandal, I say that the most important thing about it was that I was humbled. And it was so important to my life to be humbled in general. And I don't usually say that just in the context of my addiction, but I say it in the context of me getting treatment for bipolar disorder, for picking my path of helping people, for becoming non-judgmental, stuff like that. But I just saw a connection because what you were saying made me think about the 12 steps and think about how they are all about humility. One says step 7 mentions humility, but the first step is it's about admitting that you're powerless and that your life has become unmanageable. Humility. Coming to believe that there's some higher power that's greater than you. Humility. Making a decision to turn your life over. Humility. Doing a moral inventory. Humility, right? Only a humble person is going to do that and admit their flaws. Admitting to yourself that you've done wrong. Humility, right? Like
Mm.
removing the defects in your character, that is the work of humility. Humbly asking that your shortcomings be removed, again, humility. And then making amends to people that you've harmed if it's not going to harm them, again, humility. I'm not going to go through all of them. It's all comes down to this idea of humbling yourself, which is such
Mm.
a hard thing in our day and age to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And especially making amends, it- to that one was always my, how do you make amends? I always tell everybody I'm sorry after I hurt them. You know what I mean? So like, I
Mhm.
always used to think, what is this then? What is making amends? And I didn't understand it until I started working them. And I absolutely love the that step, because if you think about it, making amends really isn't about it. It is about humility, like you were talking about, but it isn't about saying I'm sorry. It's completely no recognizing your character defects and changing them, which in a sense,
And
you are
committing
apologizing. Yeah,
committing to a change, then the making amends is
exactly.
your commitment. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, when I would hurt my wife because I'm, making all these bad decisions, and I would say I'm sorry, and I didn't understand why she didn't just accept that I'm apologizing, until my actions started speaking louder than those words. Now the trust is built back, and it took some time, but
There it
yeah,
is. You nailed it, man. Like the
exactly.
difference between apologizing and
Mm,
making amends is that the actions flow with the amends.
yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, with that too, we always want, as human beings, we want instant gratification as well. And I remember early on in my recovery, or even the times that I tried to get sober and just couldn't, I wanted everything right then. I wanted the trust back from everybody that I hurt. I wanted to be sober for 10 years right off the bat. I wanted, this whole life-changing experience right then and there, until I started working it the way it's supposed to be worked, and just taking my time and being patient, knowing that I'm never going, like I said before, I'm never gonna beat this, so why do I have to rush it? Do it the right way, work on myself, and continuously do that.
Yeah. And you wrote a book, I think it came out
Mhm.
last year, right?
Yeah.
Breaking the Silence, My Journey from Addiction to Healing. And one of the things that I really that I really found sort of like powerful in it was this idea that you felt there both need to be a conversation both about addiction and about mental health.
Mm.
Tell me a little bit about what sort of like inspired you to sort of like make that case.
Yeah, sure. Because with addiction and mental health, they do go hand in hand, or at least they can most of the time, 9 times out of 10. Um, and with me, it was that. I was depressed all the time. I have anxiety, and I still deal with the anxiety portion. And, there are times I get depressed and things like that, and, I've been diagnosed. And, you know, having an addiction on top of that, it just it's not spoken about enough. It's either one or the other. In fact, there are meetings and things like that around my area where it is one or the other. And like you were talking about earlier, you can't go into an AA meeting, talk about drugs, or go into an NA meeting and talk about just alcohol and things like that. So, but that's why I wanted to raise awareness about that, because they do go hand in hand 9 times out of 10.
Agreed. One is going to get you to the other.
Yeah, exactly.
One is
Yeah,
gonna get you to
because
the other.
if you don't have both of them, yeah, one of them will get you to the other as well.
Yeah, you will eventually be there. The
Exactly.
Now you went to treatment, Father Martin's Ashley, which is renamed, right? Ashley Treatment or something like that. But it's
Yep.
this really kind of cool Maryland campus, great treatment facility. Like we're lucky to have it in the area, just like, places like Silver Hill in Connecticut and other places like that that are really thoughtful treatment centers. And not everybody has that option or the means or the time. We all come up with all sorts of excuses about why we can't get sober. I can't take time off from work, blah, 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 whatever. Whatever excuse you're going to come up with, right? Just whoever's listening who's thinking this already, it is an excuse. Just want to let you know. But but what's your advice to people who may not have the opportunity that people like you and I did to go off to a rehab or a nice one? What?
I would say do your research into the place that you are able to get into. Check out the programs that they have available. A lot of them are able. I do know that there are some that you can just walk into. There's a lot of sober housing available as well if you don't have the means. But what you want to really do is that you have to commit, regardless of where you go. You have to commit, and you have to want to really buckle down and do this. They always say you got to change your people, places, and things, and it gets thrown around a lot, I believe, but it's 100% accurate that when I got sober, I had to lose a few friends. I had to stop going to certain places. I had to, change my routing. I had to commit to all that. Now, some of the friends I did get back once I got sober. Most of them I did not. And that's fine because they're no good for me at all in any way, and they're not going to help me move forward. But if you are serious about getting into a treatment center, I 100% believe in you, and you just have to jump.
Yep.
That's really it.
And there are options, even when you think there aren't options. They're like scholarships.
Oh, yeah.
They're, you can go to your community mental health people and also go to meetings and find a therapist and do patchwork until you can get into a program. And some people do get sober without going to programs. They like patch stuff together. And, whatever your way, there are lots of people out there who are willing, I think, and able to help. Now, I want you to jump back sort of as we close into kind of like your head when your addiction was active and kind of like what it felt like. It sounded like it was miserable. What do you hope and dream for the addicts who are suffering like you suffered, and for the people who have made it into recovery? What is your hope for them? Like, there's a reason why you're out here sharing your story. What is your hope and dream for that version of you that was so sick and suffering, and all the other people who are like that?
I wish that you can see yourself like others see you, and believe that the person that you want to be is still inside of you. You know that you don't want to be this way, and taking that step to just get better. Man, I remember that when I look back and I'm like, I wish I would have been able to see how others saw me. I wish I was able to see when people would say, you're so much better than that, Damien. You have so much more potential. I wish I could have seen that. When someone tells you that, believe it, because they see something that you're not able to see. And it is okay to pat yourself on the back and be proud of who you are when you take that step and become sober. I had a hard time with that, that imposter syndrome, not thinking that I was good enough, even though people would tell me that I was. But I'm able to look at myself and be proud of who I am. And you will be too. I know that. And I believe in you that, you're able to do this. I believe in you.
It's so relatable. I remember when people would say that I love you, like heartfelt, I love you. And in my head, the track literally was saying, how could that be possible? What's wrong with you? Like, that can't be true. And I think that's a powerful, important message. Well, Damien, I just wanted to thank you for coming on. Best of luck with sending your message. I think just the fact that you're willing to speak up and let your voice be heard by people, you and I know, like, the importance of, quote, giving your, call it your qualification for whatever reason, but telling your story is what it's really about. Telling your story is and telling it honestly is a powerful way to touch people. So I appreciate you doing that.
Absolutely. And thank you again for allowing me to come on your show and tell my story. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone can get something out of this. That's the whole purpose. And I thoroughly enjoyed being on your show and having that conversation. So thank you again. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Damien. If you'd like to join us for more discussions with me and other listeners, we can be found on most social media platforms, including a listener-run Facebook group called the Silver Linings Fireside Chat. For those of you interested in true crime, you can check out our new publication, The True Crime Times, on Substack. For deeper conversations with our guests and live conversations with other listeners, and to support the podcast, you can also join us on our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Silver Linings Handbook. I'm Jason Blair, and this is The Silver Linings Handbook. We'll see you guys all again in a few days.